Good morning, everybody. I am your host, Pauline Joseph, and today I am excited to bring our guest, which seems to be most popular ever since we started this series. But before I begin, the focus of this session is around e-commerce, which is definitely something that is necessary for every business to survive during this unprecedented times. And the purpose of these discussions is to expand your knowledge, especially as a business owner, to see how you could take advantage of e-commerce solutions, of course, under the FAC solutions, which is the First Atlantic Commerce. So I would like to introduce my guest today. I just had a little technical difficulty because it's live, and please bear with me. All right, so first we have Christopher Burns, also known as Chris, and he is the CEO of First Atlantic Commerce. So if you could just do a quick introduction as to what do you do at First Atlantic Commerce, Chris?
Excellent. Thanks, Pauline. Hi, everybody. So yeah, First Atlantic Commerce is an e-commerce payment gateway company. So we provide basically the software and the technical connection between your website and the banks and the card networks to be able to accept real-time credit card transactions via your website. So if you have a website and you want to sell your products and service, domestically or to the rest of the world, we provide all the software and the technology that allows you to accept those credit card transactions through your website.
And I feel like our guest today, Jorge, is it's almost like you don't need any introduction because you have literally been our celebrity, the most viewed and commented on guest since we started this series. To say that the First Atlantic page is lit is an understatement because of you. So thank you for your presence. And for those who don't know who you are and what you do, could you do a brief introduction, please?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for that intro. So I'm George Saloom. I'm Senior Director of Business Development for Visa in the Caribbean. Right now, I work in the English Caribbean, managing as business owner for 14 markets in the Caribbean. We work with a number of partners, and First Atlantic Commerce definitely being one of them. And I'm happy to be here and excited to have this conversation with everybody.
Great. So I think let's just get straight into it. I first want to ask Chris, how does Visa work with FAC? Like, where is that integration? Where does that start?
Okay, great. Well, actually, we're not connected directly into Visa. So when you look at the transaction flow, so once somebody actually types their credit card number into a website and presses pay now, that website actually has a connection to First Atlantic Commerce's platform. And then we are connected on the back end to what we call processors. So that could be a company like First Data or Fiserv or TSYS or EPX or Evertech. And that processor actually has the connection and the certifications to connect into interchange or what we call the card networks or Visa in this instance. So we don't connect directly into Visa. We have to go through an intermediary. So there's lots of different levels of certification and security procedures that you have to qualify for to be a processor and to connect directly into the Visa network. So our job on the front end is to make it really as easy as possible for your website to be able to get access ultimately to the Visa network, which will then take that transaction and route it out to the bank that issued that credit card to check if there are funds available on there, and then be able to capture those funds and then ultimately route those funds to the bank that you have your e-commerce merchant account with. So, but we have a lot of common goals with Visa in terms of acceptance and moving transactions from a cash based to card based, which once you have a card that has a Visa brand on it, you're able to use that card in a lot more places compared to having cash. So we spend a lot of time with Visa sort of discussing strategies with regards to how to enable as many people as possible to move their businesses online, or to accept Visa cards for the business, whether that's at the point of sale or via our website.
Okay, so what I get is we're all playing on the same team to get us to adopt e-commerce, especially in the Caribbean, because I don't think the consumers are the ones that are not accustomed. I think the folks who are running the businesses are. And as a consumer myself, I see Visa so much times. Like, I associate Visa with a football competition, but I don't necessarily have an understanding of what that really means. So can you share with us, Jorge, what the role of Visa is when it comes to e-commerce?
Sure. And before jumping directly into the question, I think I'll clarify some common misconceptions. So Visa does not issue credit cards. Visa does not issue debit cards. We don't have credit risk. We don't issue or place a terminal at a merchant. But we work with a lot of companies who do, including First Atlantic Commerce. So before going into e-commerce, or I'll frame the answer more as the role that Visa plays in commerce and in payments in general. And then there's, e-commerce is part of that, and there's some special things that we do there that are specific to e-commerce. But the first component of Visa's businesses and our contribution to commerce is our network, right? We are connected to over 16,000 banks globally, and it's these partners that either issue cards and credentials and credit to their cardholders. And then there's another set of institutions that ultimately work with merchants to help them accept cards. Now, between the cardholder and the issuer, and between the merchant and the acquirer, there's a lot of different entities that play important roles to make the ecosystem more secure, to create a more user-friendly environment, create a better experience for all. And that includes fintech, it includes gateways like First Atlantic Commerce, processors, and Visa's at the center of that network. Right now, our network has reached over 3 billion cards globally, over 70 million merchants worldwide, and in more than 200 countries and 5 continents. To power that network, we have a processing core, for lack of a better word, called that we branded VisaNet. It processes transactions in 160 currencies. It has a capacity to do more than 60,000 transactions per second at a reliability of 99.9999%. This past year, we processed over 180 billion transactions and $9 trillion in payment volume. So that movement of transactions and of money, we power it. The next important role that we play in commerce is our brand. And to me, I almost call it a miracle. I think it's one of our biggest accomplishments. The fact that two strangers, a buyer and a seller, can meet, and the seller has the confidence that they're going to get paid when they exchange goods based on a banner that they see on a card is tremendous to me. And I think it's one of our biggest accomplishments and contributions. And specifically in e-commerce, where people don't see each other face to face, there's a leap of faith there that we take for granted nowadays. But you're selling to you're inputting your transactions on, or your account on a website, right? And as a merchant, you're delivering a good or service without seeing who's on the other side. And it's based on that brand trust. And then I think one last important element is around the security and the standards that we establish to ensure that all parties that touch that transaction or that participate in that transaction are working under a common set of standards within their organizations or behind their organizations through VisaNet. We have the right fraud management tools to ensure a secure transaction, and one that also preserves a positive and friendly user experience, which is so critical in commerce. That's sort of at a high level, and at a structural level, the role we play. On a day-to-day basis and more tactical, we partner with companies locally that enable local commerce. First Atlantic has been doing this for a number of years. I think they were probably the first, or at least since I've been around, they've been the leader in Caribbean e-commerce. We share a set of partners like Figaro and others that build solutions around FACs and Visa's capabilities to make it easier to begin selling online quickly and then to manage your business from one platform. And then we, on the back end, and this is sort of the silent work that we do, we work closely with issuers to make sure that, particularly for e-commerce, we have the right tools in place, the right strategies and rules in place to securely enable these transactions, and then the right promotions and communication campaigns to educate cardholders and educate merchants on how to buy and sell online.
Great. I want to go into the conversation about the Caribbean, because I feel like both of you on this live show right now probably know more about us than we know about ourselves when it comes to e-commerce. So just for those who are just joining us, if you want to learn more or catch a replay on this, you can head over to firstatlanticcommerce.com, and on the contact us section, you can sign up there, and we send regular emails and insights into the e-commerce world. So for you, Chris, what has been the change or the shift that you're seeing since the lockdown and businesses having to cope with the change of their consumers?
Yeah, I mean, it's dramatic. And I was just saying before we went live that we spend 40% of our time traveling through the Caribbean and working with our partners, and from FAC side, meeting with a lot of merchants directly. And we've been in the Caribbean for 16 plus years as an e-commerce payment gateway provider. So we have seen the real transition, pre-COVID, and it had been slow, and some of the bigger companies had made that transition, and so maybe some of the medium-sized enterprises had made that transition. But as the sort of access to broadband, internet had increased dramatically, we were starting to see a lot more businesses go online, and pre-COVID we were busy. Now once COVID hit, everything changed from an e-commerce perspective. So we were having companies that were starting to implement strategies to go online, to either sell within country or to sell internationally. And there's a large sort of diaspora network that wanted to purchase goods from back home. And once COVID hit, really being able to pay online was the only way the businesses could continue to operate. So we had this massive rush, and we've been running sort of year-end numbers in terms of how many clients we put live this year compared to the same quarter last year. And Q3 this year, it was 1,000% more than it was in Q3 last year. So that's just really testament to how many people have had their strategies, their timelines forced up. So yeah, maybe 2021 we want to go online and do e-commerce and sell it. So we've had that forced upon companies within the space of a couple of months. So and I think if we are faced with this potential threat of having to lock down again, consumers are really they're not gonna, they're going to be less tolerant of organizations that don't have the ability to pay online. And so, you know, you really need to have that strategy. And if we, you know, God forbid we do have to go back that way, that you're seamlessly able to move into you know, accepting payments and selling online as an overall business. So you know, I read a stat the other day that said, you know, in the US, and it's hard to get these stats directly for the Caribbean, but in the US, the growth in e-commerce over the last 3 months has equaled the growth in e-commerce over the last 10 years. So, you know, and that's, you know, dramatically what we're seeing within the Caribbean as well. So, you know, you know, it has direct impacts on the companies that work in that space, like us, for example. So, you know, we've been expanding, we've been hiring, we've been putting new additional services in place. You know, Jorge mentioned Figaro, for example, and we're working with multiple companies and different shopping carts to have them integrate into us, to make it as easy as possible for people to make that transition and to go online and take advantage of e-commerce in general throughout the region. So we're come to a point now where I don't think we're going to go backwards. You know, even as if we open up more and more, people have been exposed to being able to, you know, the ease and convenience of being able to shop online or pay bills online. And I think we're going to retain a lot of those individuals within the e-commerce ecosystem rather than going back to just full brick and mortar.
Great. And that comment you made on the global scale and what people are seeing, I want to pick Jorge's brain for a second here, because 7 years at Visa and 14 markets within the Caribbean. So I want to understand what you're seeing. What trends are you seeing in the Caribbean? Because we tend to get a lot of global stats, but, you know, what's the insight that you can share with us legally?
So I mean, look, the impact in the Caribbean has been significant, right, and far reaching. Of course, there's been winners and losers in this, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But or I'll get to it in a moment. But when you have an economy and a society that's so dependent on tourism, and then we see the borders shut down, that's a significant impact that reverberates through all parts of the economy. You know, we estimate that nearly 3 million jobs in the Caribbean are either directly or indirectly associated to tourism. So when you shut that down, obviously that represents lost wages. And when you couple that with local, you know, domestic shutdowns of restaurants, stores, etc., the impact is significant. At a macro, starting from the macro, then going down to the micro, you know, I don't have to tell the people on this line that the impact has been significant. Everyone knows that. Talking to our economists and to local economists in the Caribbean, we you know, the estimates are around more than half the markets are going to suffer double-digit GDP declines in 2020. And while we're hopeful that and expect there to be a bounce back in 2021, we still expect the 2021 economies to be, you know, somewhere in the range of 5 to 7% lower in 2021 versus 2019, right? But as you know, as Chris alluded, there's glimmers of positivity, right? There's good stories here that we can learn from and that we can grow from moving forward. We've seen an increase, an absolute increase in e-commerce. We've seen growth in essential services like food and drugs, home improvement, retail goods. We saw a sharp decline, but we're seeing a nice recovery in automotive, retail services, department and apparel stores. But the anything related to travel, to restaurants, you know, we saw sharp declines, you know, well over 50% in the early moments of COVID. And that, you know, we've seen some improvement, but they've sort of sustained at a low level during these last few months.
So when it comes to this is for you, Chris, because I want to shift across to the opportunities because it feels a little overwhelming because sometimes I forget that, we're so focused on tourism. As someone who grew up in Barbados,
Yeah.
it's hard to think about the hospitality industry being affected so much. So can we shift across to some of the things that you've been seeing, Chris, in the adoption space when it comes to applications for getting that e-commerce site going up? What are you seeing in terms of industries that has grown or unexpectedly saying, okay, this is an interest that is happening?
Sure. So we've seen, a lot of growth in delivery, for example. So, Jorge mentioned a drop in restaurant. So, traditional sort of dine in, absolutely brick and mortar. But what we've seen a sharp increase in is are people that are, shifting to a delivery model, or people that are creating businesses. It's kind of like an Uber Eats, where, you can order from wherever your favorite restaurant is and have that drop to your door, or brick and mortar restaurants moving to a sort of order ahead type model, where it's sort of click and collect, where they're pushing the actual order online, and moving to takeout. Now that has helped service that industry now. I mean, long term, that's probably not sustainable for actual restaurants, because they make a lot of their other revenue through other parts of the dining, like alcohol, for example. Then we've seen people shift in terms of what they're doing. So, I was talking to somebody in Barbados the other day, actually, and that they had a lot of travel related businesses, but they were very tech savvy in how they did that, and they switched up to having an online marketplace. So where all the sort of small and medium sized businesses can put their products on the website, and then they would do all the delivery around the island for that. We've seen a lot of people enter the technology space in general, based upon the need for websites or applications, to help service this new type of model, this new type of living that we all have to cope with. So, travel has been, has absolutely been massively impacted, but we're still in the background. We're seeing people, spending the time sort of updating, what their actual product is, and looking to say, okay, well, how do we actually sort of offer a safe travel experience going forward? So, from our side of it, I think we're all businesses that we touch upon within the Caribbean now in general, and we're in pretty much every market. They're taking the time to update their business models to say, okay, well, fine, this is, we've traditionally been a brick and mortar business, but now we need to move into the digital age, and move, all aspects of our business that's possible into online.
So I want to touch on the opportunity conversation, Jorge, because you have, sort of a understanding, not sort of, you will have access to the global data and then the developing world, right, which is the Caribbean considered to be so. And you have companies like Overstock, just did an entire buyover of Bit, which is in the blockchain cryptocurrency, which we'll have a conversation about later. So clearly, there's a global interest in us as a developing area, and I want you to give us, folks out there who may be having to pivot their business and they don't know where to start, based on the information that you have from a global perspective as well as the Caribbean. What type of opportunities would you advise a business owner?
Yes, and Chris alluded to some of the trends that we're seeing, but if business owners are looking what's happening around them, and some of the businesses that are thriving, I think they could use that to properly shift. So e-commerce, Chris mentioned it, I mentioned it, is having explosive growth. So if your company's not online, if it's not doing business online, if it's not doing business on social networks, it should be in there. Globally, during the first 2 months of COVID, we saw an increase of 87% in buy online, pick up in store orders, right? So that makes a lot of sense, and that includes curbside pickup. Another thing to keep in mind is that the people that you're selling to, because of this pandemic, are becoming more digitally savvy, and they're looking to shop online. We conducted a study in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we found during the first quarter that more than 13 million people made their first purchase online ever, right? Or at least with our credentials. So that's significant. You also have to keep in mind that there's a shift happening in the Caribbean around card capabilities, right? Generally in COVID, we've seen a shift towards debit transactions, towards debit use over credit, and the Caribbean debit market is changing. There's a lot of private label networks that are either partnering with Visa or migrating their cards to Visa. And the most immediate impact that'll have is that it's going to open them up to use their debit cards online. So your addressable online market is becoming more sophisticated, is becoming more demanding, and expects to be online. And many of them have or will soon have a payment credential to use online. So I think that alone warrants, for a shift in thinking from the merchants. And so I think merchants need to think about their delivery channels, and I'm not saying physical delivery, but delivery of their services, how they interact with customers, how they provide their goods, their services, and a very important part of that is how they're going to accept payments, right? And particularly in the online space where cash isn't an option, you want to have a simple, secure way of being paid. So that's definitely a move. I mean, beyond the actual payment, I think we're seeing supermarkets do it. We're seeing restaurants do it, whether it's delivery or curbside, or some sort of mechanism to create a low touch experience. That has to be a part of the consideration. And I think part of that low touch experience, not so much in Chris's world, but in the card present environment is tap and pay, right? We're seeing explosive growth in tap and pay and contactless payments throughout the world. Right now, over 60% of our non-US of our volume outside of the US that's face to face is from contactless. The US is lagging, but they're shifting quickly. The Caribbean, we've had some pockets of great success in Bermuda and in Cayman, and I think it's an important shift that we need to make as a commercial ecosystem. And I think the other opportunities is going to be for not only for those delivering, selling out there, but for those entrepreneurs and fintech looking to see how they can help these merchants execute this core business in this new online world. I think there's businesses that their entire business model is based on helping traditional organizations become more digital, right? So I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. First Atlantic Commerce provides that type of service, and they provide the infrastructure to enable fintech to build capabilities around that payment function. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well.
So I want to have a conversation about fees. I know that's cringe-worthy for a lot of people, but it's a conversation we need to have, and I want to reference it on a personal experience, and I find it's very common in the Caribbean, and I've never experienced it anywhere else, and that is I went to the doctor, and I'm always mindful because we're such a cash focused society. Like, do you take cards? Right? That was the first question. And then the next thing that they said is if you use a credit card, you're going to be, you'll have additional fees, right? So I want to hear your opinion, both you, Chris and Jorge. Chris first. What is your opinion or what suggestion would you give to to businesses? Because now that type of behavior is going to shift to their website, right? I have a personal opinion as a consumer, but before we go there, I want to hear your opinion first as to what you would tell a business owner.
Yeah, well, I think there is an official line there that I think Jorge will give in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed in terms of surcharging for accepting cards opposed to cash. Personally, I think it's very short-sighted. So, for example, myself, like I don't carry cash. I hate cash. I don't want cash. I don't want anything to do with it. And if a business doesn't accept cards, I just don't go there. Regardless to how much I might want that coffee or whatever it is. So, there is, lots of stats out there in terms of, the increased amount of business that you can get by accepting cards versus cash. Because, quite simply, if somebody walks into a store and they only have a certain amount of cash and they don't have a card, they're only going to spend as much cash as is in their wallet. If you have a card or a credit card, for example, that average spend of that individual is going to go up. So, I really a big proponent of businesses accepting cards, obviously, because of the business that we're in. But I view any business quite negatively if they're going to start surcharging or putting a minimum amount in for accepting a card transaction. So there, and there are a number of rules around that Jorge can talk to as well in terms of actually not being allowed to do that from that perspective. So I think it's very short-sighted if businesses are charging extra for accepting cards.
Wow, I didn't realize you weren't allowed to. Huh, okay. So, Jorge, can you chime in there? Because this is very interesting.
No, I think Chris hit the nail on the head there. Look, I won't emphasize the rules that much. It is against Visa's rules. Part of our contract with our acquiring partners is to ensure that Visa acceptance is treated the same as any other acceptance, the acceptance of any other payment, and that includes not charging convenience fees. But I understand the temptation, and as Chris mentioned, I think that it's an easy place to try to cover a cost, but at the same time, I think that there's a big picture that's being missed here, right? We have a number of studies demonstrating that when merchants begin to accept cards, especially in the Caribbean, where the study's not from the Caribbean, but particularly in a place like the Caribbean, where cardholders, consumers are so sophisticated, right? Many of them have cards in their pockets. They're accustomed to shopping in the U.S. and abroad and through e-commerce, and they're accustomed to a certain experience, and there's an expectation around what that experience is going to look like and what good service looks like. So when they come back home to the Caribbean, they expect a world-class experience as well. And in many instances, with the partners that we have in the market, their experience is consistent. And so when we create that friction, there's enough hurdles that a company has, and there's a lot of fees or a lot of investment that they have to make in order to attract consumers to their web pages or to their storefront, right? Why would any company risk that experience and losing that sale over a fee, right? Over a transactional fee that cardholders aren't expecting. The second point is when you go online, this is an entirely new channel, right? There's a lot of infrastructure investment behind it. That there's a lot of risks that are incurred by all the parties involved in being in this line of business. And I think what merchants need to ask themselves is the incremental value that these cards, that this payment type brings to my business, does it surpass the marginal fee that I need to pay? And in most instances, I'm not going to say every single one, but in most instances and in most communities, and I can make a strong argument that includes basically all of the Caribbean. I think that the value proposition and the business case for merchants to accept cards in the manner that they're meant to be accepted without penalizing the acceptance of cards will have a net positive effect on their business.
So actually we have some comments here. Nicholas, you read my mind because that was going to be my next question. So there's this conversation about, splitting it half and half, the expenses. But I want to go even further and talk about the fact that, when I go on Amazon, I know Amazon have fees to pay when I use my card, but I don't see those fees because I am under the assumption that's been attached to their service, their products. So those fees exist, and I also have personal experiences as to why those fees exist, because someone tried to buy truck parts in Texas with my card and instantly it was stopped, and that's something like that I'm appreciative of, and I know where my fees are going. So when it comes to business, I want you to talk to that business owner and say, okay, this is because we've had this conversation before, Chris, where it is almost as a separate business. You have to treat e-commerce with different expenses and different expectations. So, why don't they just put it up to the cost of their product and services? What do you say to that?
Well, I think a lot of people look at this and say, well, it's going to make me uncompetitive if I'm suddenly adding whatever percentage onto my goods or services to accept cards. And I don't necessarily agree with that either, because anybody that's accepting cards to their website, for example, is going to be paying those fees. People may negotiate slightly different rates based upon the size of their business or the volume of transactions they're doing, for example. But you're not at a disadvantage there, because everybody is using the same infrastructure to accept the cards. So this goes back to the conversations we were having before. It's okay, well, fully understand what your cost of doing business is as an online entity. There are a lot of costs associated with the brick and mortar business that are potentially more expensive than running an e-commerce business. So that percentage that you are spending to accept cards online, absolutely work out all your expenses and build that into the overall end cost of your of the price of the good or service that you're selling. So and I think there's a common misconception as well, certainly within the region, for all the time and all the travel and all the talks that I've done, of what those costs are, and whether they're prohibitive or not to actually bringing your business online. So and we spend a lot of time with our clients as well, actually just going through the basic math of it. Okay, so for every transaction that you're doing, if your average ticket value is this, these are what your fees are going to be for accepting that card transaction. So I think once people sit down and actually spend the time and work that out, and then realize everything that you're getting on top of that in terms of being able to open your business 24/7, 365, with the level of security that you have there as well, it is, you really are getting value for money. And it's easy for me to say that because I'm in the business, but it is proven that e-commerce businesses versus just your standard brick and mortar business, you have a much larger target audience, and your business is able to sell even when you're sleeping. So I think, we have to get past this self-fulfilling prophecy that, e-commerce is too expensive, it's too complicated. We've proven time and time again, especially over the last 6 months, that this is something that can really work, and is essential to your business.
Let me, Paulina, let me add to that actually. I think if we go back to the fundamental question of why does a merchant want to accept electronic payments? What's the benefit to them, right? And with any service, there comes a fee, right? So we have to assume that the fee will come with that service. But so the reason merchants want to accept payments is, one, they know that their shoppers will have a higher buying power at that moment. Not everyone travels with $500 in cash or $200 in cash everywhere they go. It's a security risk. So if you're, particularly if you're in a service or in a segment, in a line of business that has higher tickets, you want to make sure that your consumers have access to that spending, that buying power. Secondly, it enables new experiences and new selling channels, right? So e-commerce is an obvious one, but now we're seeing a lot of merchants either create their own app, or we're seeing business models built that are 100% on a digital framework. Let's say like the Ubers of the world. And so those new experiences and those new interactions and selling opportunities are part of what's enabled through electronic payments. The third part of it is, depending on what line of business you're in, it's the cost of cash management, right? Whether you're suffering from having, there's an operational and there's an operational expense to doing this, and depending on the line of business you're in, this could ease that pain, no? And then there's consumer preference, right? So Chris mentioned that he doesn't shop in places that don't accept cards, and there's a lot of consumers that feel this way. So many times you want to be where your customer wants to buy with the product they want to buy, using the payment method that they want to pay with, right? That's an ideal world for a merchant, and I think and electronic payments enables that. And then the other part of it is fulfilling, the acceptance of payments comes with certain expectations from a merchant, and they're important expectations, and we need to live up to that expectation around simplicity, around security, around awareness and education of the cardholder, and there's behind that card payment. So when that card is dipped in your machine or tapped on your machine or it goes through your gateway, it travels thousands of miles, goes through a lot of different checks for us to understand whether or not and try to predict whether or not this is fraudulent, so that we can authorize the transaction in less than 1 second, right? There's an entire infrastructure around that. And then the last piece is to consider that these fees not only fund the all of that infrastructure that is required to support that experience that merchants and cardholders are looking for, but then also it's used to attract cardholders and incentivize them to go and spend in your store, right? And everyone loves their points program when they're shopping with their credit card, and so it goes to that as well. And I'll make one last point. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but people do complain about fees at times. I think the majority don't. I think it's a few, and I understand why. But we did a study in one Caribbean market, right? And I'm going to use fictitious numbers just to illustrate a point. But we had one entity that was selling their e-commerce services, providing them for 3%. I'm making up that number, right? 3%, and the other one was selling it for 5%. The one that was selling, the entity selling it at a 5% rate was experiencing explosive growth. And the 3% one was growing, but not nearly at the same rate. And the reason for that is that that entity focused on a user experience that allowed merchants to get online quickly, set up their online shop, right? And it was a very turnkey, easy process to follow. And so one of the points that illustrated to me is that, while sure, I agree that pricing is a pain point, we as an industry, to fulfill our promise and to meet the expectations of our merchants, the bigger issue that we have to push electronic payments and to help merchants sell more is more of a user experience and infrastructure challenge than it is a pricing challenge. And I think this pandemic has illustrated this and has driven this point more, where we're seeing so many merchants wanting to sell online as quickly as possible to not only diversify and mitigate their business, but to also mitigate the risk of what's happening in the card present environment, or in the face-to-face environment.
So I can definitely attest to the points when you were talking about that. I literally made that as a note, because some places, similar to what Chris said, if you don't have your card, don't accept it. But also I think I have points to gain, because during this lockdown, that's to me something that I'm mentally saying, okay, eventually I'll use these points after COVID-19. I am going to use these points. And that means that you're not going to get my sale, right? And with the infrastructure, the more I learn, working with FAC over the last year, it's just so complicated. There's so many different elements to e-commerce that I have more appreciation for it now. So I'm like, okay, fine. It's a little bit more, but at the end of the day, at least if someone tries to get something, I know there's this whole system in the back end working, and I don't have to worry about it. So apparently this particular topic has everybody very engaged. I have a lot of things happening here, and I know we have 10 minutes to go, so I'm going to try to address some of these things. So one of the things that was brought up by Abbas is some businesses try to implement a minimum spend if you're using a card. Do any of you guys want to tackle that?
Yeah, I find that a bit off-putting, again, as a consumer. Again, and I understand why they're doing it, because there's a fee attached to it. So, again, I think you got to weigh that up, what that cost is against, how many potential customers you're off-putting by doing that. And, I think each time, as you play that as a longer game, you're going to lose out if you're trying to implement that type of strategy. It's very short-sighted, and you're going to offside more customers than you're going to save in fees, in my opinion.
So I want to talk about this question. Actually, it's a really good question, because we are a cash society. So Nicholas has said we're finding more customers prefer cash on delivery options versus card payments. Any suggestion on how we encourage more card payments? Jorge, you want to tackle that one?
I think we have a long way to go with certain segments of the population, and it goes beyond just the card holder, but I'll focus there. So I think there's an education component to it for sure. I think there's, from an issuing point of view, we need to make sure that we give the right card to that card holder. We need to continue working with government, with fintech, with banks, to ensure that we digitize other parts of the economy, right? So for example, one thing that we're doing in other parts of the world that we'd love to bring to the Caribbean at some point is working with remittance providers like many of the biggest ones, for them to push their funds directly onto Visa debit cards, right? So if those funds come in electronic form, then they're pushed onto a Visa card, which is already electronic. It makes it easier to pay with your card rather than having to go to the ATM, withdraw, and then pay that delivery. So there's a lot of work being done on our side with our partners to hopefully continue pushing in that direction. On the merchant side, and particularly in channels like delivery, we know that there are big operational expenses. We know that there's fraud that happens, or mistakes, where your delivery person shows up to to deliver their goods or service, and they go to the wrong address, or it was a crank call, and at the end you incur that expense, particularly if you're a restaurant, right? So I think you have to weigh the benefits that cards bring to you in that situation and decide how you want to approach the consumer, because having them pay online or over the phone or through an app prior to you delivering gives you a higher likelihood. One, it gives you a higher likelihood of delivering, of reducing fraudulent calls, right? It gives you a higher likelihood of collecting payments. And so what I've seen a number of merchants do is require payment ahead of time. They have great user experiences through either the app or through a third party app. And so that mitigates, and that's the only way that they require for that to be the only way that consumers could pay. Obviously, anytime you limit a certain type of payment, you run the risk of it alienating certain segments. But that's, I think, part of the decision that you would need to make. And maybe there's a soft way to do this. I know that I've seen a number of merchants that reward cardholders in the delivery segment, award through loyalty programs, right? They award points for shopping through their app, right, or for paying with their card. And so you can get creative in how you incentivize consumers to use cards to pay. And I think you're particularly motivated to do that if you're suffering the operational and fraud related expenses of selling over the phone or through delivery and having those losses that come with that business model.
So I don't know if it's the digital marketer in me, content creator, but what I'm hearing from you and both of you is this is an opportunity for businesses to create content around financial, sort of like a financial literacy. This is how this is how we accept credit cards. This is why we accept it. Because we also have Beverly Foster Hines. She was asking, maybe a useful template to develop to see the benefits of online. And I think maybe that's a great opportunity for businesses to create content, not just about their product and services, but why they are doing the things they're doing. Because this is also a shift, right? This is a change in behavior for not only the business, but the consumer, especially if you're accustomed giving cash on delivery.
Yeah. This is just on the point as well. I think, if we're talking about sort of Trinidad and Jamaica, the preference being to sort of cash before, I think we're going to start to see a shift there as well, because as Jorge alluded to before, the local debit cards will soon, be all branded Visa. So you're going to be able to use those cards online, whereas historically you haven't been able to. So they've been magstripe pin based before, which you haven't been able to use those online, but soon people will have that ability to be able to do that. So the convenience of being able to pay for your delivery upfront, and then be a part of that overall sort of digital experience, and have potential loyalty added to that as well. And and use whatever card you want there is going to be an important step.
Yeah, and I think, one of we're living in a more digitized world and a more formal world with every day that passes, and that was certainly accelerated has been accelerated during this COVID experience. I love what Chris said earlier. We and I've heard it from a number of people in some way, shape, or form. But we've really squeezed in, 5-10 years of digital advancement and development into the last few months. And so, we're seeing the infrastructure in the Caribbean migrating to become more digitally friendly with the migration of these cards and with the expansion of e-commerce. We're also seeing huge stakeholders step in, and like government, for example, in explosive growth in government acceptance and of payments in Jamaica. Prior to that, it was Bahamas, and now we're seeing it in Trinidad. So as different segments of society become more digital, and this is not only about payments, right? So it's about you need a phone to interact with others. We're on Zoom calls now, interacting with one another. We're seeing automation occur in large and small organizations. So as people become more digitally savvy, I think that the digital channels obviously lend themselves to more to electronic payments. As we see the infrastructure shift, we're also seeing more people with access to these payment credentials that they can use online. And so if I'm a small business using this opportunity to invest in my future or to pivot, I think you have to make the investments that are going to benefit you now, but also long term, and that align your investments with the obvious trends that we're seeing in the market. So payment acceptance, and then more specifically e-commerce acceptance, it's here to stay as part of the 21st century commerce. And so if merchants aren't doing it today, I strongly advise that they do. It's going to open a number of opportunities for you, and it's something that you can build on for the future, and that is becoming more and more a part of consumers' expectations.
So unfortunately, we are coming close. I have so many more questions, but clearly we need to do a part 2 for next time. So I want to close off because I heard Dr. Oz say last night that he is foreseeing this to be another year and a half. He thinks that it's going to be minimum 2 years of us trying to cope with what is happening. Besides being a little depressed by that, I would love to hear your feedback, first, Jorge, on what you think a post-COVID-19 world looks like as it relates to e-commerce in the Caribbean.
Even beyond e-commerce, I think it starts with e-commerce, right? We have new people shopping online, new merchants selling online, and once they experience the ease at which they can access services from the comforts of their couch, particularly if they're in quarantine, I can't imagine that we're going to see a shift back. Okay, so we're seeing more people trying to buy online. We're seeing more merchants selling online, and we're seeing more payment credentials that are enabled for online shopping. So I think that's the perfect scenario, or the perfect combination of factors for us to continue seeing e-commerce growth, and for this to be an even more prevalent channel in our markets. And we don't have to look very far. We can look over to the US or to a number of other markets to see what e-commerce represents. And in many markets, in most markets, it's significantly bigger than in the Caribbean, and we expect the Caribbean to catch up and to be in the same place. Generally speaking, I think touchless experiences, right, whether they're e-commerce or online or in face-to-face, is going to be a bigger part of what we do. right? So I think merchants should think about how, not only from a payment standpoint, but in terms of delivering their goods and services, how they can have a low touch, fast, safe, and clean way to deliver their services and to accept payments. And then the other, which is not exactly e-commerce, but I'll mention it anyways. What we're seeing globally is a big desire and a demand from consumers to have access to their money instantly or as quickly in real time. So whether you're thinking P2P or remittances, or one that's having huge growth in other parts of the world, earned wage access, which means that you have access to your salary as you go earning it rather than at the end of the week or the end of the month. So having a desire to receive your funds quickly, right, and get paid quickly, I think is going to be a bigger part of our lives in payments and in our personal lives as well.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with all of that. And to add, I think it's it's going to be a dramatic push into moving the Caribbean into a cashless society, for sure. We on the other side of our business are doing a lot of work in the kiosk space, for example. So where people can pay their bills or whatever it is in a socially distanced style. But I think it's what this will also do for the Caribbean is move it into more of a technology economy, because there is so much, yes, everything is moving online. So, it's about supporting that as well, with local businesses and local talent to be able to support that. So we're just seeing so many companies that are approaching this from a software development standpoint, from a social media perspective, that is educational, in terms of different webinars that they're producing. So and there's just a huge amount of talent within the Caribbean that can support all of that. So I think we're going to see this general shift in skill sets that is going to happen to support all of that. And then there's lots of opportunity around the social aspect of it as well, because people, we are social beings at heart, and and unfortunately, I think you're right. Until back end of next year, there's just no simple way to produce enough vaccine once it actually comes out. And that's going to go to the at-risk people first. So there's going to be this quite long period where we're still not able to do what we were used to doing. So there will be a lot of opportunities around creating other acceptable social experiences, and companies and technology around that to help us stay sane over the next 12 to 18 months.
Great. I think that is a very positive way to end this, because we are in a very it's just sort of mental health strain in terms of not being able to do things we're accustomed doing. So I am hopeful by this discussion. If you guys want to, I didn't pass this boy Jorge, but I don't know, they could head over to your LinkedIn profile and follow you. Is that okay?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Feel free.
All right. Cool. So we tagged him on the First Atlantic Commerce LinkedIn page. We're gonna tag him on this as well. Yes, Ethan, there will be a replay, because once we close it off, it becomes a video that you can watch again. I will speak on behalf of Chris. If you want to reach out to him, tag him. And you could also head over to firstatlanticcommerce.com/contact us, and we have a very regular newsletter that goes and gives insight into what's happening. So thank you so much, gentlemen. I'm going to wish you a good day and weekend ahead, in the different parts of the world that you are at. Thank you so much, everybody out there, for joining us. Yes, Beverly, I learned a lot, as much as it was for you guys. I have a lot to take away. I cannot wait for the time that I can actually go online and buy something from Barbados, because I really miss macaroni pie. I don't know if I could buy that. That's probably not thing, but to be able to have e-commerce among the Caribbean islands would be a dream, and that's something that we can all look forward to once us business owners and entrepreneurs adapt to what we are living right now. It's not even a new normal, it's a normal. So thank you so much for joining us. We will have First Citizens Bank with our next guest in this series. Head over to First Atlantic Commerce page on LinkedIn and you will see the event right at the top. And we're going to talk about their new EasyBiz solution, and there is a social button involved. So if you have a retail business in the Caribbean, well, in Trinidad, because the solution is in Trinidad for now, I advise that you join this because, again, I want to give you my money. And in order for me to give you my money, you need to make sure and have that button so I can just purchase your clothes. Because, hey, why not, right? So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you on the next First Atlantic Commerce Live show. Bye, guys.